doing our first Q&A with Judy. My name is Simon Huck. I'm the co-founder of Judy. And over the last 9 months, we have received thousands of messages from across this country with people asking a plethora of questions around emergency preparedness. And so many of those questions have been beautifully answered by Soraya, who does, and Soraya, I'm going to toot your horn here, but you do an incredible job at taking something which can feel really scary and giving really simple, straightforward answers. And I think, one of the things I've learned in this preparedness journey is if you can change 15% of your behavior and be 15%, just 15% more conscious and aware of some of the things you need to prepare for, it really does change your whole mindset around emergencies and natural disasters. So without further ado, I will pass the baton over to Soraya and we will get to some of your questions. And if there's a question that we've answered, but you have additional questions, I'm going to be kind of fielding the Q&A, the live chat. So I will be able to relay that to Soraya as she's answering.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. I appreciate it. And welcome. I know it's 5:30 on a Monday or 8:30 on the East Coast. So thank you for spending your evening with us. We've received lots of questions, really good ones. And so what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to start with giving you a little bit of an introduction about who I am and what I do. And then I'm going to start reading some of the questions and some of the responses to those types of questions. So just to give you guys all a little bit of a background, my name is Soraya Sutherlin. I am a certified emergency manager. I've been doing this for about 13 years. I've been in many different sectors: healthcare, government, private, worked in schools. I've worked in a plethora of different fields in emergency management. I've been through 2 presidential declaration disasters. I've also am currently involved in the COVID-19 response in LA County. So we're really busy and we are constantly looking and revising our plans, modifying things, and trying to get the best information to our community and the public about how to be prepared. At the end of the day, 70% of first responders are you and me, right? So the more prepared, the better prepared we are as a community, the more likely, the more resilient we all will be in overcoming those types of disasters. So what I'd like to do, and what we'll do, is I'll read some of the questions and give you some of those responses and answers. If, as Simon had mentioned before, if you have questions or I trigger something that came up that you wanted to ask, please feel free to use the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to address those. So the first question we received was, I got my kit. What are 3 things I can do right away to make the most of it when I need it? So the first thing I would absolutely tell you to do is take your kit and open your kit. The worst thing you can do is get it and stick it somewhere. So open the kit up and familiarize yourself with what's in it. And then look at what's currently in the kit and think about your own personal needs and make modifications. So if you need medications, for example, you have a specific prescription medication, you want to make sure you add that to it. I would say take the flashlight that's in the kit. It's not going to do you a whole lot of good in the kit when you are in bed. So take the flashlight and the batteries and stick them next to your bed. Take the whistle, again, stick it next to your bed. That's something you can do right now. There's an emergency contact list that comes with the kits. Take that out and start filling it out. Really start thinking about the things that we don't normally think about. Everything we have is so auto-programmed right now in our phones. We just hit a contact and it calls someone, or we look it up on the internet, right? Well, in a disaster, we aren't gonna be able to do that. So make sure you write those phone numbers down. You think about those different questions that'll prompt you to think about a response, and put that on your refrigerator. Make a photocopy, stick it in your kid's backpack. There's many different options. So I would say those are probably the first 3 things I would do when you get your kit. Familiarize yourself with it. Talk about it with your family. Know what's actually in it. It's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you don't know what's in your kit. So open it up, take the stuff out. It's very easy to put everything back in. It's very organized and it's labeled. So you can add stuff to it as needed and go through and figure out what's in it and see what you need to supplement. The second question that we received was, what are some good additional essential items to pack in my Judy kit, go bag, or backpack supplies? So the one thing I tell everybody that everybody just notoriously forgets are shoes. Put shoes in your go bag. We see without fail, the number one thing we see with individuals arriving at shelters is they don't have shoes. So put some shoes, old tennis shoes. You're getting a new pair of shoes, again, closed-toed, sturdy shoes. We're not talking flip-flops. Stick them in your kit, your go bag, your kit, so you have them. Also put a pair of shoes under your bed. So just kind of make a kind of a rotation. I always say 3 pairs of shoes, bed, in your go bag, also in your car. So those are 3 places to keep pairs of tennis shoes. So, and you don't need fantastic, expensive shoes, just basic tennis shoes that are going to protect your feet in case you have to walk through any type of debris. The other thing I would say is cash. We don't often think about that, especially with COVID, everything is cashless right now. But cash and small bills. Electricity could possibly be down. If you need to purchase anything, your credit card's not gonna work. So cash and small bills, singles, fives, small denominations, I would say up to $100 if possible, maybe if you can a little bit more, but start small. If 20 is all you can do, 20 single dollar bills, put them in your kit, and keep cash in there. I would also say family photos, keeping current pictures of your family, your children, if you have pets, if you have dependent care adults, keeping relevant and current photos of your family members in your emergency kit is essential, because you don't realize how often we just don't print things anymore. And if you have to go to a shelter, if you have to go to a reunification site, they're going to ask you if you have a current photo of your family member, of your child, of your pet. And if your phone's dead, you won't be able to access it. Also, if your phone's dead, you won't be able to show them the picture. So again, always have current family photos. I also say comfort items. So we often forget or neglect the fact we're so into the emergency mindset of this is what we need for survival. We forget the general things that keep us together, right? So, we think about emergencies and you think about emergency food and water and flashlights and things like that, but what are the things you need? So for me, I love chocolate. So I have chocolate in my emergency kit. That is my thing. And I know it might sound silly, but for me, there's some that helps me. And, whatever that is for you, it can be different. It doesn't have to be food. It could be, if it's a poem, if it's a book, if it's a picture, whatever it is, what are those comfort items? What do you need to be okay? And don't neglect that. And also think about your children and family members. What do they need? What are their comfort items? Vitamins. One of those things that we forget. In disasters, we're not eating the way we normally would eat, right? So you're going to be lacking your basic nutrients and supplemental foods that we would normally get vitamins from. So supplemental vitamins is always a really good thing to just throw in your kit. Cough drops. It's so funny because you forget about some of this stuff. Like, put a pack of cough drops in your emergency kit. You don't know how long you're going to be away if you have to grab that kit and go somewhere. Advil, basic things that you just don't think that you might need to add. Add those to your emergency kit. Water purifiers. That's another one that you can add, and there are, supplemental materials that you can put in there as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more about like what to put in your go bag and some of these other questions, but I would absolutely start there. More than anything, every family and every individual is different. So start with the basics and then look at what your family needs are, what your individual needs are, and supplement based on that. All right. The other question we received was, how do I prepare? So what do we need to know? The big, gigantic question, how do I prepare for an emergency? So 4 things I'll tell you. Number 1, know the risks in your area. That's universal, it goes everywhere. Know what types of risks you're subjected to based on where you live. Sign up to receive emergency alerts. You need to know how to get notified in the event of an emergency. Listen to authorities. So if authorities are telling you you need to leave, you need to evacuate, you need to shelter, you need to listen to them. But on the other side of that is, if you don't get notified, if you feel unsafe, you can leave. You don't have to be told to leave to evacuate. And then have a plan, right? So what does that plan look like? Where are you going to go? How are you going to communicate? What are you going to do? It's interesting because we think about preparedness in the scale of large disasters. But it's important to note that it's not just those big scale disasters. It could be a house fire. Just in 2019, there was a house fire every 24 seconds. So keeping that in mind, it doesn't have to be something so catastrophic. It could just be a simple house fire. So things like grabbing a fire extinguisher, having a fire extinguisher on every floor of your house. The kitchen's the most common place for house fires. So having one readily accessible in your kitchen, not buried in the back of the cabinet where you're not going to be able to find it or get to it easily. Have it accessible, have it in your kitchen. You can put out very simple, small fires. An ABC fire extinguisher is going to do the trick. Again, if the fire is large enough, don't attempt to put it out yourself. Obviously, call 911 and get out of the house. But that would be something I would absolutely recommend. As adults that we're all listening to this, our biggest barriers to just general awareness of what's going on around us are our phones and headphones. So I always tell people when you're out and about, just look up, look up what's around you, know your exits, know who's around you, what's going on. Those are really simple things that you can do right now to help kind of just get your mindset into the fact. And I'm not talking about identifying all the scary things that are out there, just what's going on around you, cars, streets, people. Those are things that are going to help bring up your awareness. I'm going to get into this. This is a very broad question, so I'm going to get into a lot of these details and some of the other questions. So hopefully we'll answer those then. So how do you practice with your gear? That was one of the questions. I like this one a lot. So what I recommend doing, and you can all do this at home, is set a 2-minute timer on your phone, on a timer, and practice evacuating. So practice, what can you get? What can't you get? What can you get, your people, your things, and get out of your house in 2 minutes? Is it realistic? And then take a second after that timer goes off and make a list. Okay, I wasn't able to do this, or I was able to do this. I'm missing these documents. I grabbed this and I wouldn't normally grab that. You don't realize when you're in this, even just in a very safe, non-emergent timed environment, your whole mind frame goes into fight or flight. And you start not thinking clearly. We've seen people grab things that you would never expect to grab. I mean, people are grabbing, not kidding, wine bottles, and that's what they're evacuating their house with. And again, then they have to stop and think, like, why would I grab my important documents? I'd go to my safe and I'd get my, my marriage certificate and birth certificates and things like that. So those are things that I would recommend doing. Practice doing it. How would you get out of your house? If you have small children, do it with them. The small children, older children, practice what you would do, where you would go, and assemble in an area, and then talk about, this is where we would go and this is what we would do. And then make that list with your family. Let's see. Okay, this is a great one. What to do to prepare when you have kids under the age of 5 years old? All right. So the one thing we can do as parents with our children is to teach them to be aware of their surroundings. So when they're young, it's hard to sometimes have these difficult conversations because their brains aren't quite developed in the capacity to be able to understand and decipher good from bad to that degree of what's normal versus not normal. And so what a great way to do this with your kids in a very non-scary way that teaches them about just general awareness about their surroundings is point out things throughout the day that will get them thinking about just different things. So for an example, use the letters of the alphabet if you have small children. Pick a letter and ask them to point or find things that start with a certain color or a certain letter. So start with A. Let's all find things that start with A. And again, they don't realize that you're building this capacity in them to not only be able to recognize things around them, but also pointing out when people are doing dangerous things. So, what are they doing? And then how could we be safe? So hold on, I'm on this. Sorry, this is my daughter. Point out things that you can do and how to be safe about it. Okay. So those are things that you can do. Also point out police, point out exits, and also teach your children what to do when they're lost. Where should they go? What should they do? Children at a very young age can understand what to do when you teach them in very simple terms. Also, teach them how to dial 911. This is so critical. Most of us don't have landline phones anymore, so we all have cell phones. So teach them how to unlock a phone and dial 911. A great way to do that is to get paper plates and put the numbers on a phone and tape them on a wall. And have your kids practice with their hands, dial 911, right? So have them practice that. Teach them how to unlock your phone. I mean, it's amazing, but young children have what they can do with a cell phone these days is pretty incredible. So don't just don't neglect the fact that they won't be able to do it. They shockingly they surprise me every day. So also, you know, involve them in that conversation in being prepared. When you involve them in that conversation, they feel that they have the tools to fix the problem. And you're also building that skill capacity, that ability. That's a lifelong skill, right? You're encouraging them to be part of that process. And there's ways to do it that are non-scary. You can do it in ways that ask questions. And I always say, start with asking questions of your children. You know, what did you hear about this? What did you think about that? Schools, when children, again, in school, they're teaching kids about what to do during an earthquake. Reinforce that at home, you know, talk about those things. So there's so many learning opportunities. Take advantage of that and teach them in times of non-disaster. These are safe environments that we can be talking to our children about these types of things in. All right, the other question we had was, how can you involve individuals with disabilities or chronic health conditions to become prepared and participate in preparedness? I would say the number one thing in this is involve them in your planning. Absolutely, invite them to the table. Their perspective is invaluable. Things that you may not know or understand, they may highlight or bring to your attention. So ask them questions. We all don't have the answers to everything. And the best way that we can be better prepared is to invite everybody to the table. Everyone has a perspective. And we need to make sure that we hear from everyone and get their voices heard. I also say make it simple. So what are their basic needs? Don't make it too complicated. Always a great way to do this is just reach out to your local emergency management office and ask what resources are available to help them prepare. And they have resources locally that can help individuals kind of walk through what are your basic needs and how do we help support those basic needs? Are there resources that are available that they can connect you to? There's lots of regional centers across the country that provide lots of incredible resources. So a lot of it's just reaching out and connecting with your local resources, letting them know that you're there, you're in the community, and asking how you can be part of that conversation as well. So that's another really great way to get engaged in that process. The other question we had was, how can you prepare the elderly for an emergency? You know, it was interesting because when we look at large scale disasters, we're always kind of looking for common threads, themes. How can we be better engaged in that planning process? And so when we looked back to Hurricane Katrina, over 200,000 individuals with chronic health conditions were displaced or isolated from their lifelines, essentially, and they had no access to their usual medications. So even those that took a 3-day supply with them to shelters, as we all saw, they were in shelters way longer than 3 days. And so it becomes a very, very dire issue. So when we start looking for how do we help those individuals in preparedness, a lot of it has to do with their support and their family members and their communities. Looking at if they have medical resources, if they are on oxygen, having supplemental oxygen, if they have medical devices that require electricity, what are those contingency plans around power shutoffs and things like that? There are so many things being done with nonprofits and local government entities and at the state level. A lot of it you just need to reach out to your local jurisdiction and say, here I am, I'm here in this community. I want to be part of that solution. How can we better work together? And a lot of that it starts at the very basics of just how can we better help support each other. All right, the other question was, how are smartphones going to work if we don't have any power? That's a really good question because we're seeing it a lot. So the first the one thing we tell all of our residents are make sure you have 3 ways to receive emergency notifications. So when we talk about how you're going to get notified, you have SMS, right? Text messaging and email. So we always say data goes first. So data takes less data to send, and it will go quickly. We found even in emergency situations where phone lines are down and power is spotty. I mean, we looked at Haiti during the earthquake where 90% of their infrastructure was down. People were able to get text messages through. So even though the infrastructure may not be at full capacity, it will still try and send those messages. The other piece I would say is you can also enable Wi-Fi calling on your phone. Ensure that that's enabled. 2 parts. Your carrier will ask you your current location. It's important to know if you do use Wi-Fi calling that your location, your actual approximate location is not going to be relayed to 911 dispatch centers. So you will be asked to provide that when you turn on Wi-Fi calling. So keep that in mind as well. But again, if cell towers go down, you still can make phone calls over the internet. There's also apps that you can download. Zello is a fantastic app. We see it used all the time in disasters. You actually can create groups on Zello, with family members, and you can chat, and it acts like a 2-way radio. WhatsApp is another app that can be utilized. But I always say we've got the technology, but we almost need to go back to basics. Have an AM FM radio, a hand crank radio. There are radios in these Judy kits as well. AM FM radio, your local jurisdiction likely has an AM channel. Find out what that is. But again, the emergency alert system, the EAS system, if there is a statewide emergency, countywide emergency, you get those tones that come across your screen. They will be able to broadcast information on AM FM radio. So that's another key point that I would absolutely encourage everyone to be aware of. Also, finding trusted networks is critical. I always say find this ahead of time. The last thing you want to do is be milling for information when you get an emergency alert. So figure out who your trusted networks are. Are they community partners? Are they your neighbors? Find your community and work together. We're only as strong as our community is and how we recover from these types of disasters. Figure out what those trusted networks are. What are those sources of information that when you get that message, you get that alert, you trust that message. You're going to actually do something with it. You're not going to try and source it or find out if it's accurate or true. Who are those trusted networks, and identify them ahead of time. And then just the last piece I would add is if you are in a situation where you could potentially either lose power or the ability to make phone calls, I would recommend what you can do is on your phone, you can change your outgoing voice message to just let people know that you're okay. I'm okay, I've evacuated, I'm going to this location, or I'm sheltering here, this is where I am if you get this message. If your phone dies and they try and contact your phone line, that voicemail recording will let your loved ones know that you're okay. All right, so what to do in the event of an earthquake? Where do we go? Emergency essentials to have on hand. So what do you do during an earthquake? Drop, cover, and hold. Basics, right? We just talk about getting to the ground, find cover for your body if possible, but your head and neck is the most important, and hold on. Do not stand in doorways. They are hazardous. Homes are not built the way they used to be. And then you've got to deal with a door that's swinging. You want to make sure that you're protecting your head and your neck. So I always say, if you don't get on the ground, the earthquake's going to throw you to the ground. If you've ever tried to walk during an earthquake, it's extremely difficult. So get somewhere low, try and protect your head and your neck, get under something. All right. You need to get under something stable, a desk, a table, a chair, if that's all you have. If you're in bed, stay there. Do not try and run. Do not try and get anything. Earthquakes don't injure you. It's what happens when you try and move or during the shaking, things fall, bookshelves fall. If you have small children, teach them to stay in their beds. It's ironic because this is what I do, right? But the reality is in an earthquake, there's nothing in the world that's going to stop me from getting to my children. And I do this, right? So let's be honest. So what I recommend doing is, if you are like me and there's nothing in the world that's going to keep you from your children, remove all the obstacles in your pathway. So we're talking, get rid of the bookshelves, or if you have bookshelves, ensure they're braced to the wall, that the books are actually secured. There's nothing heavy on top. Picture frames, they are secured to the wall with earthquake putty, or they're bolted so that they aren't going to fall on you and create obstacles. And just try and get as low as you can to the ground, because it will be very, very difficult to walk. If you're injured, you're not going to be able to help your family. So keep that in mind, but teach your kids to stay in bed. And I always tell my kids, with my children, I say, stay in bed and turn over on your tummies and cover your head and neck with a pillow. We tell them to turn over on their tummies to protect their vital organs, right? So stay where they are. Most homes are not going to collapse, right, in earthquakes. So it's about all the debris and things that are going to fall on them if they try and move. And they will be scared, and we understand that. But again, stay where you are, okay? If you can't get under something, also interior walls are your next best choice. A fetal position along an interior wall of your home are typically the strongest walls, and protect yourself, get as small as you can. All right, the next question, should we keep our Judy in the car, the garage, or in the house? So the response to that is all the above. You should have one in every location. And I always say split your supplies if you can. You don't want to lose access to all of your emergency supplies by having it in the garage, and then you can't get to your garage, or in your bedroom and you can't get in your bedroom. So if you can split it up, absolutely you need something in your car. You need to have a bag in your car all the time. Also have a go bag and have a larger kit, right? So you need to have many options, something with you that you can grab and go, something with you at your home if you're here, and resources that you have available, and then something in your car that's mobile and you have with you at all times. The next question we received was, what emergency equipment should we keep in the cabin of our car? So there also, because of temperature fluctuations in your vehicle, you need to just be aware that a lot of your supplies may not last as long as, say, somewhere where you've got a temperature controlled environment. I would absolutely say, so there is going to be a car kit that's going to be launched in the middle of 2021. So look for that, that's coming. But other things I would say to just be aware of, again, summers, things get really hot, winters get very cold. The things that we typically see that go bad the fastest are obviously food and water. So if you live in an environment where your car is constantly extremely hot or extremely cold, make sure you're doing a rotation. And so you can do, I would recommend, especially with the cold, hot environments, every month. If that's not realistic, kind of set a calendar reminder for every 3 months. I really am a huge fan of stainless steel water bottles. They last a lot longer. You can also, especially if they're just the strict stainless steel water bottles, you can utilize them to boil water. So that's just another kind of 2 for 1 in that. But stainless steel water bottles are great, regular water bottles. Other things I would absolutely say to keep in your car, I had mentioned this before, shoes, women, shoes. I don't know how many times I hear and see situations where women go to work and they're in heels, and then they get stuck somewhere and they have heels and they've got to walk, right? So have an extra pair of shoes, a sweatshirt, a hat, a whistle, scissors. I can't tell you how many times I've needed scissors in my car. I mean, it's almost comical. So scissors, if you have children, colored pencils, not crayons, crayons melt. Colored pencils, things that won't require electricity, right? If you end up somewhere, card games, things that for them to do, wipes, make sure you have some sanitizing wipes, regular baby wipes, first aid kit. I'm notorious. It's pretty funny. Yesterday we were at the park. Guess what? I didn't have my first aid kit with me. And we had a simple boo-boo, cuts and scrapes and things like that. So first aid kit, keep that in your car. The other one, oh, this is a great one. Maps. You need to have maps in your car, like the old school Thomas Guide maps, because in an actual emergency, Waze isn't working. At least it's not working well. And you also don't want it to take you into areas that have been evacuated. And we actually saw this in 2018 with the fires in the foothills in California, where Waze was actually directing people into evacuated areas, because guess what? There was no traffic. So again, maps, hard copy maps, and go through your maps and actually get a Thomas Guide. You can buy them, I think, different locations, but identify your evacuation routes. How are you going to get in and out of your neighborhood? So you can highlight that and keep that in mind. and then any additional tools that you might need. All right, so the other question we received was, how do we take care of our animals? So we are doing a pet kit that's launching in 2021, so look for that as well. But I would also say is you need to consider them as another member of your family. A hungry animal is an angry animal, and the last thing you want to be doing is rationing your food or water or supplies with an animal when you're trying to feed your children or dependent family members. So think of them as another person and plan for them accordingly. Also keep in mind that you need to have copies of their vaccine records if you need to go to a shelter, have a leash, an extra leash with you, and then figure out what the boarding options are. So if you have to evacuate, does your vet allow for you to board your animal? What are their rules of taking animals in disasters? A lot of this is just having these conversations before the disaster, having these critical conversations, things that you don't want to be having in the middle of a catastrophe, right? So you want to make sure you reach out now, we're calm, you want to find out what your options are, and then you can calmly think about what that process is going to look like. The next question we received was, when people evacuate a natural disaster like a fire, where do they go if they have no family or friends safely nearby? Is it smart to go to a hotel with COVID? So I will say this, shelters and hotels all have to follow the CDC guidelines around the compliance with all the COVID-19 restrictions. So you can feel confident and safe if you do get evacuated. Right now, what we're seeing is many, instead of operating shelters, they are operating some, but they're putting many individuals into hotels. So I would say absolutely make sure, if you know that that might be you and that might be your situation, is to have sanitary supplies on hand. So face masks, gloves, anything that would make you feel more confident, especially if you're going to a new environment, having those things with you. But now is a really good time to start getting to know kind of your neighbors and your community, because it's incredible. I mean, people really rise to the occasion. They really do. What I see in disasters are people helping other people, and they really come together and they band together, and people really want to do what's right and what's good. So even just connecting with your local community group and making, close contacts and friends through that is a great opportunity for that as well. The next question we have was, how should we leave things at our house in the event of an evacuation, turn off water, etc.? So it depends, I guess, is the best answer. I would say it's helpful to turn off your gas if you're leaving your home because it's in an earthquake. The leading cause of destruction post-earthquake are fires by broken gas lines. So if you can turn off your gas, I would say that would be an easy option. Just understand that you'd have to have the gas company come out and turn it back on. You can't do that by yourself. There's a lot of questions about turning off water and power. I will say this, it really depends. We've seen during Hurricane Irma, we had the utility companies telling homeowners it was really up to them, but they were encouraging Mother Nature to kind of take its course. I would say this, if you are turning off your power, for example, you are going to run the risk, obviously, of it not maybe going out, right, as part of the emergency. And then you've got now bad food in your fridge and your freezer's defrosting and things like that. What I would tell you to do, though, is unplug your appliances. Because if it is a power outage where it knocks out a transformer, you could have a surge of light happen very quickly, and it could blow your electronics. And so we've seen that often. Even with power outages, if you all of a sudden lose power, it's always a really good idea to start unplugging some of these devices, some of the bigger appliance items that require a lot of electricity. Because when that power surge all turns back on, it's a huge amount of power coming at one time and can fry your electronics. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how to leave your house and what to do. If you are, again, but if you have standing water around you, absolutely turn your power off. That makes sense, right? With related to water, I would say you're turning your water off because of risk of flooding. You don't want your home flooded for some reason. So it's really up to the homeowner. I would say gas is always kind of a fail-safe, especially if there's been an earthquake or if you're in a fire prone area and you've been evacuated. But those are just things that you'd have to, I would say, listen to your utility providers during that specific incident, because they typically have very specific directives based on the emergency. All right. The other question, other than getting my family and to safety, what's the most important thing I need to think about in an emergency evacuation situation? So make a checklist, and I recommend doing this. So there's 3 different checklists. One, if I have no time, right? So if you have no time to get out of your house, what are you doing? You're grabbing your people and your pets, right? And you're going to post it near your emergency exits. If you have 5 minutes, right? You're going to make a list and you're going to put, I have medications, glasses, phone chargers, laptops, things of that nature, medical equipment is applicable, and put the location of these items. Post it by the door. If you have 5 minutes, you want to grab this on your refrigerator, wherever it is. Where is it? Where are you grabbing? And you can use that as a guide. Then if you have 30 minutes, you're going to put obviously all the above, but you're going to add photos, stuffed animals, change of clothes for all your family members. You can make that list as extensive as you want. Just put the locations of these key items, emergency documents, where are they? You don't realize a lot of us keep emergency documents in our safes, right? And trying to fumble with a key to try and open a safe and grab these documents takes not time, but also trying to find the keys and get the stuff out. So again, I love to tell people to get a flash drive. Put all of your information, scan it onto a flash drive as a backup, and get an encrypted flash drive so you don't have to worry about your information being taken or stolen or lost. Put all that on a flash drive as a backup. You can stick it in your go bag. You can put it in your dash in your car that's locked. You can put it in a safety deposit box. Again, important documents, things that are going to be a nightmare to try and get back. Copies of birth certificates, marriage licenses, your insurance information, fronts and backs of credit cards. You don't realize how you need to know what's in your wallet and call your credit card companies when your wallet gets stolen. And so by having the front and back of the card, and I always say back because that's where all the phone numbers are, what cards were in your wallet, what was in your wallet, and you'll have a copy of that. Copies of passports. Every time I travel, I have a copy of my passport, everything a photocopy, passport, credit cards, everything, in case I get stuck somewhere, I lose my wallet, I need to go to a US consulate and tell them this is who I am. I have a copy of it. So those are things that I would absolutely recommend. Shoes, make sure you have shoes for all family members, and your go bag, right? So these are all things that you're going to be thinking about aside from just your people. The list is very extensive, but I would say those are the key pieces when you're talking about evacuation. The next question we received, what are the most important items and food to have in case I can't go out? So if you're being sheltered in place. So I would say number 1 is water. We can survive without food for 3 weeks, but we cannot survive without water. So water is our lifeline. Make sure that you have enough water, a sufficient supply of water. And it varies really from people to people. I would say, look at your situation. If you have a large family, you're going to need more, right? If you have a smaller family, you may not need all this additional stuff. Look at non-perishable food items. So dried fruit is a fantastic thing to add to your emergency kit. It has nutrients in it, right? We talk about that vitamin component, but it's easily stored. You can throw them in your emergency kit. Dried fruit is great. Pastas and rice and things like that easily. They have long shelf lives. They last a long time. Applesauce. Applesauce is another really great one. But my personal favorite, are Pop-Tarts because they last forever. And it's actually the number 1 item that we see in hurricanes. Walmart stocks up on them and they sell out. I don't know what's in them, but they're a great item to keep at home in your emergency kit to add. And kids love them. So that's one of those things that it's always a great thing to have in your emergency kit. But I would say, look at your individual needs. What do you eat? I always tell people a disaster is not the time to start experimenting with food. It's kind of the last thing you want to do. So you don't need a big GI problem during an emergency. So again, look for things that you're used to eating. Don't start experimenting with funny things. Don't buy stuff that you would not normally eat. So tuna is a great one. A lot of people like to buy nuts like peanuts and almond butter and things like that. The caveat to that is just be aware that you may be more thirsty. And so your water consumption might be higher. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at how you're stocking your emergency supplies. And if you ever do lose power in your home, go duct tape your refrigerator shut. And the reason I tell you that is I can't tell you how many times, and we do it as adults, but my children stand there with the refrigerator wide open, just staring. So if you lose power, you want to preserve as much as you can in your refrigerator, right? And then you're going to triage what you're eating. You're going to eat your perishables first, and then you're going to go to your non-perishables. So by just duct taping that refrigerator will make you think more than once about opening it. Do I really need to go in there? Do I really need something out of there? Let's keep it as the stuff in there as cold as possible. All right. The next question we received. Oh, so this is a great one. So how did Judy get its name? So why are we called Judy? So when the founders started thinking about preparedness and thinking about kind of what are we going to name this preparedness brand, they started talking to their friends and they said, you know what, who is someone that's reliable in your life, that's dependable, that always shows up? And everyone they talked to, they knew a Judy. So they were like, everyone has a Judy in their life. And that's kind of the concept behind this whole idea is it's preparedness made simple, right? Everyone has a Judy. We want to take the complications out of trying to prepare because it can be overwhelming and simplify it. It starts with one step and we build. You don't have to go out and build this massive emergency kit that's something to be on par with, doomsday preppers. We're talking about just basic things that can make a huge valuable difference in your life. And so that's how kind of Judy came to fruition is everyone has a Judy. She's dependable, she's reliable. And that's what we want for our communities is to know that Judy is a reliable and dependable partner in preparedness. All right, what are the top 5 things to get today to prepare for any disaster? So we've talked about food and water. I think I've really gone into depth with that. Inventory your home. Get your phone out and walk through your home on video and inventory each room and the contents of your house. Most of us don't keep receipts for big ticket items in our home, and it's going to be very difficult if you lose your home in a fire or if you lose your home as part of a natural disaster to try and make insurance claims when you can't remember how each room looked, what the contents of each room was. It's something we can all do tonight. You get off this Zoom call, you go home, you in your living room, just walk around with your video camera and inventory your home. And again, put that on that flash drive, that encrypted flash drive, keep a copy of it. Your insurance company will tell you the same thing. It's really critical. It makes it so much easier to recount what was there and how to submit claims for getting yourself back up on your feet. Create an emergency plan. Just talk about it. A lot of this conversation just starts at home. What are we going to do? So if we think about a situation based on the hazards in your area, if we had an issue, if there was an earthquake and we were all home, what is our plan? If we're separated, okay, where are our children, right? Where are our family members? How are we going to talk to each other? Just thinking, instead of thinking about it as this big, large, abstract, overwhelming sense of what do we do, think about it in simple terms. If it happens right now and we're here together, what's our plan? And if it happens at 9 o'clock in the morning, where is everybody? What's our plan? If we can't communicate, what's our plan? So those are simple things that you can do. Identify an out-of-state contact. It's very simple. Friend, family member. Often in disasters, we cannot communicate with people across the street from us. Infrastructure gets overwhelmed, phone lines get overwhelmed. An out-of-state contact, that's why you see it on your kids' emergency forms. You see it on your emergency paperwork when you go to hospitals or when you go do anything, they ask for that out-of-state contact. The reason for that is calls will likely be able to go somewhere out of the area versus in the area because the infrastructure is not overwhelmed. So out-of-state contact, you can do that this evening. First aid supplies. You can mitigate many disasters by just knowing how to clean a basic wound and bandage a basic wound. So you don't necessarily need to have first aid training, though I absolutely do recommend it. Get to have first aid training, but just have a first aid kit on hand and have a separate water source for that first aid kit. You don't want to be using your drinking water to be cleaning wounds and things of that nature. Get a go bag. If you don't have one, get one and start adding things that are specific to your family outside of just the basics. So things that are very specific and personal to you. If you don't have a fire extinguisher, you need to go get one. There's no reason to not have one. You need to have one on every level of your home. And if you only have one, then make sure it's located, again, kitchen and garage and living room are the 3 areas I would say I would recommend keeping it. And then just because we're in daylight savings and it just happened yesterday, Now is a great time to check your smoke detector batteries. You want to make sure you have working smoke detectors. I cannot tell you how many times, often on a daily basis, we hear stories of how there was a terrible outcome because there was not a working smoke detector in the home. Make sure you have working smoke detectors. It is so simple. You can just change the batteries. Even if you're not sure, just change the batteries. Every 6 months, we follow daylight savings time, so we have that to thank for it. You can set a calendar alarm on your phone to just make sure you're doing it. You can do that tonight. Those are things that you can do this evening. All right. And then the last question that we received was, what are the key emergency contacts to know when a disaster hits? So it's not just key contacts. I would say absolutely write down your local police and fire telephone numbers, also your local phone numbers for your utility companies. If you have children, write down poison control, your emergency vet phone numbers, but also write down your phone numbers of your family members. I mentioned earlier, we're so programmed to just hitting a name and it calls a person. Write down your phone numbers for your family members. We talk in disasters, 10% of us panic, the remaining 90% of us do nothing. And it has to do with the way our brains are made and how we respond to emergencies. We either freeze, we think intently, or we run, right? Those are like the three broad categories of how we respond to trauma. So write down your phone numbers on a piece of paper, your children's school phone numbers. Guess what? Your phone, if you don't have access to the internet, you're not going to be able to look up all these phone numbers. Your power goes out, things like that. If you have a landline phone, you can then make those calls to your children's schools, local hospital numbers. Think about what you would need. Think about your situation and your circle. What phone numbers do you need to know? Do you know them? Write down your phone number. Write down your house address. Simple things that people cannot remember because their brains go into this fight or flight conditioning. So I'm a huge fan of writing things down because technology does, it's not always our fail-proof. So having redundancies in multiple ways is absolutely something that I recommend. So I think that was our last question. I know we have a few, so I'll open it up kind of for questions. You can use the chat box to submit your question and hopefully I can get that answered. So I don't know if Simon, you want to read them for me or? Okay, I'm not hearing you, but let's see. Are there any questions? I thought I saw a hand. Okay, so I do see a hand. Cami, if I'm gonna hit allow to talk, will that work? And hopefully you're able to talk. And I'm gonna ask to unmute you. So Cami, I have given you ability to talk. We don't hear you. So if you can unmute. Okay, here we go. I got one. What's the best course of action, to do during and after an earthquake? So I would say absolutely during an earthquake, drop, cover, hold. You want to get under something sturdy. Try not to move or walk around. If you aren't already on the ground, the earthquake will throw you to the ground. So keep that in mind. So drop, cover, hold, stay where you are, try and avoid moving. After an earthquake, the first 10 to 15 minutes, what you do will seal your fate. So I always say make a checklist on what you're going to do. I'm going to ensure that my gas is turned off right away. If you don't have an automatic gas shutoff valve on your house, you can get one installed, especially if you live in earthquake county or country, we call it, because anything above a 4.5, if you aren't home, you can't turn off your gas. So 4.5 magnitude earthquake will automatically shut off your gas. So you can have one installed, know how to do it, know how to turn off your water and your power if you have pipes that are leaking or you have outlets that are sparking, things like that. Make a checklist. What are you going to do? What are you going to check on? What are your first actions that you're going to follow after an earthquake? So That was a great question. Thank you. All right, so let's see. Okay, so one of the questions, Shirley, thank you for this question. You mentioned getting a network. Is it just as important to coordinate plans with neighbors you are comfortable with? Absolutely. A lot of this is just having that conversation. Kind of, what are you doing? What is their plan? It's a great idea to reach out to your local neighborhood and find out just on your street, are there children that are home often alone? Could there be a network? Could you check in on them after disaster? Their parents at work, away from the home, having that network. Okay, Shirley, you're going to go check on the, Smith kids at the end of the street. That's part of that network that we were talking about. If you have individuals that are, elderly or need additional assistance, having a plan on like, how are we going to all check in with each other? How are we going to work together? We have to look out for each other in this environment. So absolutely. Discuss kind of what your plan is, what you want to, what you're going to do. And then it can start conversations around, oh, I didn't think about that, or that's a great concept, or I think, we're going to work together to do this. So, and there are programs like Map Your Neighborhood it's all about this, right? Bringing your community, your local resources together to be able to work together to be a more networked and resilient community. All right. Are there any more questions? You can really ask, anything, and I'm happy to answer. And if I don't have it, I will absolutely get you an answer. But I commend you all for being here this evening. The first step in preparedness is just acknowledging the fact that you want to learn more about how to be prepared. And you've already taken that first step. So I hope you found this Zoom meeting or chat informational. I'm sorry for some of the disruptions, but and if you have more questions or I said something that made you think about something differently, please let us know. Again, we're a resource for you in the community. We want to be helpful and we want to get you the right information. So, great. Yes. So the other question we had was, will there be a follow-up email with resources from this webinar? And absolutely, we'll put something together and have that sent out. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I will let you guys have the rest of your evening. Thank you for joining me this evening. I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful, and hopefully we'll be here to chat soon. So thanks, you guys.